And welcome everyone to this great hour of power right ahead of us. Thank you for joining the Samaritas World Refugee Day panel discussion. I'm your host, Shelley Irwin. I'm in a classroom in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Of course, appropriately so, the Eberhard Center, Grand Valley State University. I host and produce a WGVU morning show and was honored to be able to spotlight this town hall this week. This hour is all about you. It's all about getting your questions answered with our esteemed panelists. So here we are in the current environment. The issue of refugee challenges and rights can be a Pandora's box of misunderstanding, and that is why we are here with Samaritas. We want to set the record straight. Since the 50s, Samaritas has resettled thousands of refugees, of course, who've left their native homeland because they are in danger of being persecuted because of their race, ethnicity, religion, or political views. These are people who don't have a home to go to, unlike other immigrants. An important reminder, Samaritas values your time and your thoughts. So please submit a question or comment to any of the panelists as we zoom on. Click on the question and answer button on your screen that will submit your questions. We will have time for that near the end, so thank you. Let's begin this virtual event. Of course, it honors World Refugee Day this Saturday. I introduce our esteemed panelists. We have Basil Moosley, the Program Manager for Migrant Services at Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, that's LIRS. In this role, he oversees services provided nationally to migrants and asylum seekers around the country, including services at the border with Mexico. Prior to working with LIRS, Basil was the Refugee Resettlement Supervisor at Refugee Services of Texas, and has over 8 years of experience in serving refugees, displaced populations domestically and internationally. Basil himself, an asylum seeker who came to the U.S. about 5 years ago from Syria. We appreciate you being here, Basil.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes. Next is Ben Cavana, Michigan State Refugee Coordinator. Big job you have, Program Director in the Office of Global Michigan. State Refugee Coordinator, you are responsible, Ben, for ensuring coordination of all public and private resources for refugee resettlement and integration in the state. Ben, you have over 16 years of experience in child welfare and other social service programs. Thank you for being here, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, my pleasure.
Next, we introduce the Reverend Dr. William Danaher, AKA, I think we can call you Father Bill. You do serve on the board of Samaritas. You do, of course, are involved with Metro Detroit area Christ Church Cran, compassionate leader who has spent years working in organizations like Samaritas to welcome refugees and, of course, other immigrants into Michigan. You also have some great pointers on how churches can create programs that can really make a difference in the lives of people from different countries. Welcome to you, Father Bill.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Great to be with you.
Yes. Let me introduce Vezna Syczyk. At Samaritas, she is a Samaritas New Americans Program Director who interacts with refugees on a daily basis to get them resettled, learn English, and find jobs. She and her husband are also refugees with a powerful story of their journey from Bosnia and Herzegovina and as refugees through Samaritas. So hello to you, Vezna.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here.
Elvira Kovacevic, Project Coordinator for the Gateways for Growth Initiative in Grand Rapids and Kent County, currently pursuing your Juris Doctor at Chicago-Kent College of Law. Being the daughter of refugees, Elvira, you're committed to advocating for new Americans and lifting up their voices. You are currently developing a welcome plan to mend the barriers that new Americans like you face today. Hello to you, Elvira.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Lastly, let's introduce Lupia Roli Bongala, AKA, we'll call you Roli, a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo. You fled your country due to an intense war and spent years in a refugee camp in Malawi. After 7 years in the camp, Raleigh gained approval for resettlement in the U.S., now living and working 2 jobs here in Michigan. I understand you speak more than 4 languages. Roli, hello to you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you to this great audience. 81 participants ready to learn how we can all give. Let's start with you, Basil, if I may, with our first question from LIRS. Would you share with our audience some of the positive economic impacts you've seen from the refugee community.
Sure thing. First, allow me to thank you all for having us, and I'm really happy to speak next to these amazing panel and folks. So to answer your question first, please allow me to destigmatize the word refugee. Refugees are part of our community. They are teachers, doctors, lawyers, service members, and many of them considered essential workers. We've seen how important this is during the current pandemic. But most importantly, also, many refugees are business owners. And I usually like to kind of give numbers to estimate like how important this is to our economy. And this, just a quick number, there's the most 500 fortunate companies, there was 40% of those are founded by refugees, immigrants, and their children. So refugees contribute to our economy through a lot of different ways. Take taxes, for example. In 2015, there was a survey where it appeared that refugees contributed over $21 billion in the U.S. as taxes. In addition, you could think about how they are also a spending power. So another number that I also found that in California, where refugees alone contributed for over $17 billion as a spending power. So all of that takes a piece of our economic dynamic. But also I want to note that many refugees contribute to the public sector, public service. So earlier today, I had a conversation with Celeshai Ayalo. He's a CEO at a social service nonprofit in Ohio. And this social service, they offer family care, mental health programs, and they also help people in the community to register to vote. So Celeshai, he came from Ethiopia as a refugee 20 years ago. And he started his career in the public service, and today he's managing that nonprofit. And I asked him a question about whether he sees that those nonprofits must serve the refugee community. And his response was, and I quote, that they don't look at immigration status when they provide services. And I think this is remarkable to see another impact for refugees in our communities, which is not only financial, but also beyond that to be for a service that everybody can benefit from.
Thank you on that. Elvira, I'd like to have you respond to that question.
Great, thank you. So thank you for having me. And I really want to get to the root of the narrative that refugees and immigrants, new Americans, are a burden on our society and in our communities, because that is frankly false. In the entire state of Michigan, the only population growth in the past 5 years has come from immigration itself. And since I work directly in Kent County and focus there, a lot of my statistics will come from new Americans in Kent County. But the numbers are so significant that if you imagine it on a state level, then on a national level, it's astounding. So as of 2010, there are over 50,000 new Americans in Kent County that were documented by the census. So we're estimating that the number is actually much higher and only increasing. So then in 2016, new Americans in Kent County paid over $300 million in state and federal taxes, leaving them with $1 billion in spending power in Kent County alone. This is expanding our economy. It's making our economy one that works not just for some, but it's amplifying it so that everyone has an opportunity to prosper. But moreover, if we want to zero in on that false narrative that immigrants and refugees are a burden, in terms of social services, 26% of immigrants in Kent County received Medicare or Medicaid, compared to 31% of US-born residents in 2016. Similarly, about 57% of immigrants had private healthcare coverage, while 26.4% of US-born residents had public healthcare coverage. In 2016, new Americans contributed nearly $125 million to Social Security and $33.3 million to Medicare. Now, I'm not saying that new Americans are only as worthy as they contribute to our society, but many are quick to denounce immigration and refugees and immigrants on the basis that they do not contribute and that they take in our society and they are a burden. And that narrative is frankly false.
Thank you for that dispelling. There are many positive economic impacts. I want to move on to a question. I want to bring you into the conversation, Ben. How have you seen public opinion about refugees change, let's just say over the past few years, Ben?
Sure. So certainly it has become a much more politically charged topic and program. And I feel like it really is a twofold answer. There have been some dissenting voices, and nationally, as you mentioned in the introduction, just some misinformed details about the program have gained attention. However, it's actually been really encouraging to see such an overwhelming response to the issue of refugee resettlement, as it has gained more attention in the public eye. There's been a huge increase in volunteerism and donations for a lot of the agencies, here on the meeting with us today. There's been increased opportunities for all of us for education on the subject with some really hopeful responses. And I think over the last few years, the best example of this is an executive order from the federal government asked for a consent process for local communities and states to continue the resettlement process in their communities. And, here in Michigan, we just had an overwhelming response. There was a lot of concern when that came out. And, that consent process has actually been put on hold now through a lawsuit. But nonetheless, before any of that happened, all of our communities in Michigan, and some that didn't even need to based on the parameters of the executive order, stepped forward and said, we want refugees in our communities for all the reasons that have already been shared. And so I think that while it has become, somewhat of a politically charged topic, that there has been an overwhelming response demonstrating the value, the welcome, and the interest that so many of our communities have for our refugee populations.
Also, can you respond to that question?
Sure. Well, there has definitely been an increased sense of xenophobia due to the current administration and its rhetoric and policies. In the past, the speech was that we have a responsibility as the greatest nation on earth to offer protection to those persecuted. Now, look at the recent policies that we've seen throughout the couple of years. Family separation was an acceptable idea for some. In addition, immigration detention is expanding, and those are for-profit prisons that jails immigrants, not for a crime they committed, just because they are here seeking protection. And this imprisonment could take as long as their asylum case is open, which could be multiple years. The travel bans, we've seen that many refugees came to the United States with a promise that their family will follow them to join them. And unfortunately, after they came, they've heard of a travel ban that didn't allow for their family to join them. The bottom line is refugees come to the US to find safety, to put food on the table, send their kids to schools, and contribute, be part of the society. Unfortunately, they found themselves being treated, and their stories are used as pawns for political gain for one party over the other.
Thank you for that. I'm going to actually turn to you, Father Bill, if you would answer the question on how have you seen public opinion about refugees change over these past few years?
Well, thank you so much, Shelley. I think that we're living through an incredibly important time as a country. And I feel a particular obligation to make sure that I'm really clear about the gospel that I preach. I think there are a lot of people who are preaching some sort of gospel, but the question we have to ask as people of faith is, what is the gospel we're preaching? And I think the gospel that I feel I'm called to preach is a gospel that's based in the scriptures. And it remembers that God appeared to Abraham as a refugee. God came in the form of three visitors to Abraham as he was sitting outside a tent by the oaks of Mamre, we read in the book of Genesis, and came and delivered a promise that Abraham would become the father of nations. And at the end of the Bible, and we're skipping a lot of really important passages, as you probably are guessing, there's a last moment in the book of Hebrews where we receive the encouragement to be hospitable, to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some of you have entertained angels. Particularly now, we are dealing in a time in which I feel I have to fight every day to maintain the moral compass of my church, my community, and my nation. And I believe I have to hold on to the scriptures that God has given me to speak from. And so I do feel like this is a moment in which we have to be completely full-throated and very clear that welcoming the stranger, welcoming immigrants, welcoming refugees, providing hospitality for those who have need, that this is not just a matter of whether or not we do well as a country. And I believe everything that has been said about the economic benefits. And I have a PhD from Yale University too. And I promise you, I can understand economics too. But what I'm really concerned about is whether or not we're doing right or wrong and good or evil in the work that we do as a church, as a community, as a nation. So I believe that right now, everything that we're experiencing in terms of the rising levels of bigotry and racism towards refugees is something that we have to repudiate fully. And we have to we've tried to be clear, we've tried to be kind, we've tried to make sure that we take the high road. And I am so proud of places like Samaritas for doing that. We've tried to be factual in our responses, but sooner or later, we come to a point where we have to say, here I stand. And I think what I am so grateful for and what I've seen in my own experience is when a congregation opens its heart to a refugee family, they experience profound transformation. They begin to see that we only understand God by looking into each other's eyes. So I feel called to just kind of name that in this time, because oftentimes we get doxxed, we get trolled, we get people who are going to attack us. We're going to get people who are going to undermine us. We get people who oppose us. We're going to have people who are going to pass legislation meant to curtail our activities, and that's been happening over the past 4 years.
Thank you, Father Bill. Vezna, would you also answer the question, have you seen public opinion? How have you seen public opinion about refugees over the past couple of years, please?
So my journey with the refugee program and Samaritas in particular is, it started in 1995 and I resettled with my family through Samaritas, actually, formerly Lutheran Social Services. And through all these years, I've seen a lot of changes, whether it is population that is being resettled, the number of refugees that are being resettled through years, or seeing changes in programs that are available to refugees. And now in 2013 and years after that, for instance, 2016, we were settling in 70, 85,000 refugees in the United States. So Samaritas was at that time yearly resettling about 1,500 refugees. So all of a sudden in 2018, we only had 45,000 refugees approved for to be resettled in the United States. And then this year, only 18,000. So when I look at that and then I compare how many people we were able to resettle in 2018 to Samaritas, only 164, and in 2019, 334 refugees. That is scary. It really, it breaks my heart. And just being a refugee, and I was lucky, my refugee journey was only 6 months to wait in a third country. And I know we didn't have anyone who would send us invite to United States. So my husband and I, we actually came through UNHCR, and just applying everywhere to other countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. and only United States accept us. So I know what it means waiting in somewhere and not knowing what will happen tomorrow. And honestly, you know, now I was lucky to wait only 6 months, but right now the journey is only taking 2 years or more. We have refugees in Africa that are spending whole life in refugee camp and living without basic needs being satisfied for so many years. It's heartbreaking. So
Yes.
that's my
Thank you. Thank you, Vezna. Let's move to present day, if I may, bringing in the word pandemic. What special challenges has this pandemic created, of course, for refugees and cultural integration? I'll begin with you, Elvira.
Great, thank you so much. Essentially, the pandemic has amplified existing structural and societal issues around specifically access to services and resources, but now with a couple new variables, including timeliness, mode of distribution of information, and the dependence on technology. So first, you have this pre-existing issue, access to services. What exists, where to go, how to set up an appointment if you need an appointment, etc. But now it's coupled with the digital divide, in addition to whatever other barriers one may face, including language. So with COVID-19, everything transitioned online, from service announcements, where to go for services, what's available and how, but that excludes many members of our community. And I see this mirrored in my own family, where I have family members who aren't completely fluent in English or comfortable with technology, but now are faced in essentially a sink or swim situation. And this is a resonating theme throughout the communities I've served or worked with. With limited access to services and resources, it's not a matter of convenience right now. It can quite literally be a matter of staying healthy or becoming gravely ill. In sum, the pandemic has amplified existing societal and structural issues, but now with extremely higher stakes.
Thank you, Elvira. Rolly, it's time for you. Let's hear from you. May we ask, in this time of the pandemic, what have you experienced? If you can expand perhaps on the isolation that may be felt.
Thank you so much. About this, I live alone. I have more time to speak with my wife and my children, because I have 2 boys in the Malawi Dzaleka camp. I use my WhatsApp. Sometimes also I take, sometimes I take, sometimes I do sometimes the exercise, okay? Also, I take also my time to cooking because I stay home. Yeah.
Yes. Could refugees similar to you be lonely, and how could we help here?
Sorry?
Could there also be, however, loneliness? Or
Yeah.
sounds like you're doing a great job with at least surrounding yourself with exercise, perhaps with healthy eating, and all. Anything else you'd like to share on that, Rolly?
Yes. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I want to end that with, let's bring you back into the conversation, Basel. Immigration detention on this, please.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, immigration detention is have been on the rise throughout the last, I don't want to say years, maybe decade, but these detention centers are not equipped to handle strict guidelines as we hear in this pandemic. Like, for example, social distancing cannot be enforced in these overcrowded facilities. And people, when if someone inside immigration detention gets the coronavirus, they have nowhere, they cannot isolate themselves. Even we've heard a lot of reports about facilities not having adequate access for soap or other hygiene items. So instead, detainees are told to go purchase these items if they run out. And just to let you know, like inside immigration detention, detainees can work voluntarily, but they make as low as $1 per day. So imagine if someone in immigration detention is going to spend a couple of dollars to buy a bar of soap. So this is how the situation is. I just looked at the numbers. There's the Calhoun County Correctional Center. It's relatively a small detention center with 200 beds. They just confirmed 5 coronavirus cases in it. So, I mean, advocates have been asking to get those folks released out of immigration detention before it's too late. We know how the numbers in coronavirus increased rapidly. And we hope, folks be safe. But these immigration detention centers definitely needs the public attention, and hopefully the administration and the government can work out another alternative, which are very vital, alternative to immigration detention, that it's more as case management and other ways to have compliance with these folks. So I'll just end it.
Yes, thank you. Father Bill, would you address special challenges with the pandemic with our refugees?
Well, I mean, I can certainly say that there's going to be issues around isolation, and I mean, primarily whenever you provide the kind of support that you do to a refugee family, there's a lot of a lot of informal and contact that is close. There's a lot of intimacy. Usually there's need to step in, driving the family, getting them set up, visiting the home, going through the home, making sure everybody is safe, trying to do, getting a response team from your parish to go and visit regularly, providing ways for the family to find, to culturally acclimate as well as to acclimate to their particular location. All of those things require in-person kinds of interaction. And then also keeping in mind that refugees, when they do come, are experiencing incredible trauma. And then one of the things that I had to say to my group that was doing this is that there really is, we have to keep in mind that there's a difference between a refugee family and an immigrant family, because I had a lot of immigrants in my congregation who immediately stepped forward to help refugees. And they couldn't quite some of them couldn't quite figure out, like, why is it that a refugee doesn't have the kind of get up and go that an immigrant does? But in fact, what happens is they, people who are refugees are often experiencing profound trauma and didn't want to leave their country. They're forced to leave. And so they need particular interaction and care that a typical immigrant family may not need. So all of that gets compromised when you have social distancing. All of that becomes difficult. All of the kind of normal ways that people kind of immediately learn how to find their way in a new context becomes really difficult in a context like COVID-19.
Thank you. And Vezna, if you could round out the answer to this question, especially maybe in the area of employment and food security.
Definitely. We had really quickly to Samaritas refugee programs to adjust to the new needs of refugee population. We have standard programs where we provide services to refugees for up to 5 years, whether it's with employment, resettlement, social adjustment, assistance with the schools. But all of a sudden in March, when all the schools are closed, everyone lost a job. We had to adopt and assist refugees to get to food, because imagine how difficult it was for us, average American, to find food when shelves were empty, and then compare it with the refugee who doesn't even have a transportation to go to multiple stores and look for that. So We quickly asked for donations through Amazon wishlist. For food, volunteers also played huge role. They delivered food to our refugees at the doorstep. And in addition, we received multiple calls from refugees that lost job. For hardworking refugees that like to provide the food on a table and don't like to depend on others, all of a sudden losing a job is almost like end of the world. So we were receiving calls day and night, and staff was working at Samaritas program to collect all the information, if eligible, apply them for public assistance. And I will gladly say that our refugees started working all of last week. So they're returning to jobs. We are even finding jobs for refugees that never worked, and they like to use the bike if they don't have car. So I think that next few months, we will really dedicate a lot of time for returning refugees to work. Kids in school in particular also had a problem because with new refugees, with multiple kids in a household, even though schools were providing technology, we have parents that cannot assist them because of the language barrier. We have kids or parents that don't even know how to upload their homework. So that's where we spent a lot of time. So definitely, you know, working our best, but refugees are taking it, you know, showing resilience and going bravely through this challenge that the pandemic brought us.
Yeah, thank you, Vezna. I want to bring you back into the conversation, Ben, with your expertise statewide. Where do you see the most opportunities for refugees here in Michigan?
Sure. So the thing I'm most excited about, and where I feel like as an administrator and from the state level, we can most offer opportunities for refugees is by hearing their own voices. We've started several initiatives to hear from refugees directly. We're working on opportunities for our office as well as our Michigan Committee for Refugee Resettlement to connect directly with refugee communities and refugee leaders to get their input and their buy-in for how we move refugee resettlement and programming opportunities forward. There's, some local initiatives we're engaging with, as well as national initiatives on this front. Church World Service just hired and placed a refugee advocate, a former refugee for Michigan in Grand Rapids, but serving statewide, and our office is working closely with them as well. Just to, again, really engage refugees themselves and, let their voice from their experience speak to how we fashion and program things moving forward. In line with that, we've been working hard to gather information on program gaps and, just really make informed and innovative approaches in all of this work. And COVID-19 certainly threw a wrench into a lot of projects, and, the reality for everyone, regardless, refugee or not. But we're determined for the work to go forward, and we, are taking that as a learning opportunity. I think Elvira spoke to it, and others, just around, the digital, capacity and opportunities for individuals, and making sure that we engage refugees and help them, walk through that process as well. And then lastly, I would just say, Michigan is blessed with a large number of truly caring agencies, strong community partnerships, and a high level of community goodwill and support for welcoming our new neighbors and just assisting them through that integration process. And as a result, we see a really high success rate in our public schools, a high job placement rate and job retention rate, and lots of refugees seeking continuing education opportunities and getting civically involved themselves in our communities then.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Father Bill, I want to bring you back into the conversation, and Rolly, you are up next. We know Samaritas is rooted in traditional Christian beliefs, enjoying a strong church and community support. So tell us, Father Bill, how you've been able to leverage, if you would, the support of your congregation to help refugees such as Rolly.
So, we began to lean into this as a whole congregation. And one of the things that I have as a principle is, and even though we are a generous congregation and have recently dedicated almost $200,000 to respond to COVID-19 to local areas, we have a kind of rule that money follows hands. And so what we wanted to do was to immediately assess whether or not we had the congregation members who were interested in hosting a refugee family. And I gave, as you might have imagined, a fairly impassioned plea. And we had about 50 people step forward who agreed to be on a committee that would oversee the adoption of our family. And this gathered people that were, some people who don't come to church very regularly, some people who come every Sunday, got together, and they began to actually organize themselves incredibly carefully so that we could have a holistic approach to the family itself. So the family that we hosted was from Syria, and we created a kind of team that would look at what does the mother need? What are her exact needs does she have? And really her need was to get a driver's license and to help her get proficient enough in English to get a driver's license. And so we had one of our group came and taught her to drive. We found out that one of the children had a significant, in addition to language challenges, had a significant learning disability. And so we actually worked hard with both the local school and provided direct help to make sure that she received what she needed so that she could thrive, and she's doing really, really well. So all of that took place over 6 months. And it amazes me, and I have to say this as a point of testimony to anybody who's seeking to do this, the congregation itself was transformed by it. Now, one person that I had to make sure to negotiate the political terrain, because I have a congregation that frankly is comprised of both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, it's about 50-50, which makes it an exciting time for us. What I did do is I made sure that I had a Republican politician who on the basis of Christian beliefs was pro-refugees, and that was Bingoe, who is the first appointee of the Office of New Americans by Governor Snyder. He came and actually preached on the day that we welcomed our family. And that was such an important thing to do, because I think a lot of people needed to be placed into a position of comfort so that they could know that what they were doing was okay, that it was the right thing to do. And of course, Bingoe has a flower business that's remarkable. And so you could have seen, if you could have seen the flowers in the church, it was like we were entertaining Queen Elizabeth or something like that. And it was a remarkable moment. It was a joyous moment. And one of the things I really want to stress for people is, yes, this is going to be swimming against the stream of where we are as a culture right now. Yes, this is going to be at times difficult. Yes, this is going to be going to require significant commitment, but you will experience profound joy and transformation when you do this work.
Thank you for that. Again, to our audience, question and answers. We'll be ready for your questions and answers soon. I go to you, Rolly. I'm going to just ask you a bit about your stories, Rolly. So follow me along if you would. Why did you want to come to the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you. The refugee does not choose where to go, okay? Mm-hmm. The decision comes from the country. The only thing I was hoping for was to find peace and stability in a place where I can work for a better future. So for me, or for my case, the United States, USA, is the peace place for me, for my better future, also for my family.
How long did it take for you to get approved?
About my case, around 6 years, no, 7 years, sorry. Because I've been in the refugee camp in Malawi since 2010. And 2016, I did my first interview with people from the United States. And I made my trip from Malawi to USA in October 16, 2018.
So you were in Malawi while you were waiting for your approval to get to the US?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. How does it feel to be here now, Rolly?
Now, first, I like American, okay? I like American because it is the land of opportunity. So I have a job. Also, I want to say thank you to the American government for this opportunity. Also, I say thank to Samaritas because now Samaritas is like my family for their assistance. But I feel empty because my family is very too far and me because my family is too far. So I feel empty. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So glad you are here. We are going to move on to audience questions. There's one in the hopper, but Ben, I want to go back to you. Just a common question I have, but the difference, if you would, between immigrants, green card holders, and refugees. One and the same, different?
Sure. So I guess from a simplified, very high level perspective, immigrant is any individual seeking residence in another country. Lawfully admitted immigrants to the U.S. are commonly here through a familial relationship or on a work or education visa. Refugees, on the other hand, are fleeing their home country and achieve refugee status due to a well-founded fear of persecution in their home country due to race, religion, nationality, or participation in a certain social group. And they go through, as Raleigh, pointed to with his own personal experience, they go through a long and involved process overseas, oftentimes in a refugee camp involving multiple layers of international partners and U.S. government entities. And then green card holders or lawful permanent residents are also would be referred to as are individuals who are legally accorded the privilege of residing permanently in the United States. And most of the aforementioned immigrant groups and all refugees are eligible to apply for that green card holder status. Hopefully that helps.
Yes. I want to go to you, Vezna. A question from one of our great audience participants, 92 of us together. Share a success story in your work at Samaritas.
Well, there are many. I mean, every year it's difficult to really choose the best one. In my opinion, refugees that are particularly having a hard time, let's say like single mothers coming with multiple children, coming to work, or coming to the United States and dealing with all the issues and not being able to, rely on anyone. When they learn English and go to work and they're happy to provide for their children, that's the best feeling, being integrated in the United States. So despite all the challenges, that they're experiencing having children, not having childcare, not speaking English, not having transportation, just overcome all these obstacles, start working, having children, attending school, continuing education. I think that's the best feeling that I can have. That means that we help that person.
Father Bill, that question was also directed to you. If you success story, if you could.
Well, I appreciate that. I thank you so much. I think I'd want to just pick up a little bit on the time we had hosting a refugee family, which I think was incredibly powerful for us, because it was actually a way in which we could do something that we can get our hands on and to be involved with. And that was really key. Obviously, Samaritas does many, many different things, and we've stepped in different ways as a church to support the work of Samaritas itself. But in particular, this work with refugees, I feel, is one of the ways in which it's kind of the heart and soul. I suppose one thing I would lift up, besides the immediate experience we had with the refugee family, one of my parishioners, it turns out his spouse of many years was a refugee from Slovenia. Back in the day, back in the 50s, she was a refugee through Lutheran Social Services and Lutheran Refugee Services. And I found this out just the other day. At 92 years old, she's here because of the work that was done for many years before. And what's amazing to me is she has become such a pillar of the community, and she had such a productive role in the community, and you would have never known her itinerary as a refugee unless she chose to reveal it. And I think that this is the kind of work that organizations that Samaritas has been doing under a different name, but for the same work for many, many years. And so I hope that the social utility of that is really understood, how important it is to the well-being of this state and this country that we have this kind of ministry that we do. The final thing I would like to say is what was interesting for me is, of the group of people who got together and worked to help this refugee family settle, they were from very different from perspectives politically. And this was an incredible healing move for the congregation, because what happens is when we debate refugees or immigration, we tend to immediately become abstract in our thinking, and we tend to kind of the rhetoric gets high. And it's actually in the relational moment, when you see the family itself, that you begin to see why this work is so important. It's only through getting to know people like Raleigh, that you begin to actually understand how important this is to your own walk with God, as well as to the work of people of goodwill in this world.
Thank you, Father Bill. Question from our audience: how can the community in general help Samaritas in welcoming refugees and helping them get adjusted? Can I hear from Basil or Elvira, perhaps? We'll start with you, Basil.
Sure. Thank you so much for this question. Well, I mean, there's many ways where people can join the service and be able to assist. I'll just name some options. Advocating for refugees. As you all know, the refugee resettlement numbers are decided on an annual basis. The president announced how many refugees can come in every year. So we're trying to push and advocate that at least 95,000 refugees arrive in the next fiscal year. Another way to advocate is, we've also heard about the COVID-19 stimulus packages. These packages the past packages didn't include many of our refugee families in it. So we also want to make sure that any next stimulus package comes out includes our refugees families in it. Now, these are just options for what to advocate for. There's other opportunities where you can volunteer. I'm pretty sure Samaritas offers plenty of volunteer opportunities, whether on a one-time only thing or a more regular basis. So please take advantage of these opportunities and help your fellow refugees. There's also, look in your communities. Refugees are all over. You don't need to wait for an opportunity to be able to help. You can become a family mentor to someone, or just have look at your neighbors who are immigrants and chat with them so they feel welcome in the community.
Yes, Elvira, your answer.
Great. So I really want to stress on the point of asking yourself the question of, don't just be welcoming, but what can you do to foster a sense of belonging? And so a good starting point on a very micro level is reaching out to Samaritas. As Basil mentioned, there are very many volunteer opportunities. I became a cultural mentor for a refugee family for a few months, and I helped one specific family for about 3 months, met with them once bi-weekly, helped them go through their mail, helped their kids with homework, helped them really just start settling into their community and feeling like they belong and they weren't just strangers. And like Basil mentioned, you don't have to wait for that opportunity, or you don't have to go to a refugee resettlement agency. You can look around you. And if everyone looks just like you, maybe branch out and go into places that you haven't been before and learn from one another, but not with a savior model, but with, I'm here to learn, let's learn from one another.
Rolly, I'm going to go with you on this question. It's very specific. What is one thing we can do to help? You can be honest.
Okay, I'm speaking to French. Okay, so translate for me. Yeah. Donc, parce que je veux être vraiment original. Donc, s'il faut m'aider, j'ai vraiment besoin d'une aide seulement. C'est être près de ma famille. Que ma famille soit avec moi. C'est la plus grande chose que j'adore.
Okay. So Mr. Rowley is saying that there is one thing that he would like help with, and it's to bring his family here.
Bring his family here. How easy or how difficult is that, if I can ask a panelist for that follow-up?
I will say at this time, very difficult. Refugees are not coming, not only due to pandemic, obviously, but in general. Even though for this year, the plan was to resettle 18,000 refugees in the United States, but we are far below that number. And we don't know really when refugees will start coming, how long it will take. God forbid it takes another 7 years for Rolly's family. So I would say for everyone, please advocate for refugees to come to the United States. If somebody wasn't a refugee and didn't experience what it means, you know, being left, unable to live normal life, they cannot understand why it is so important. These refugees are helping the United States. They're legal. There is stigma. They're illegal in the United States. They're not. So I think we need to give them a chance. And another two things I would say: volunteer, help, give your time, help a child with their homework, help a refugee to learn English virtually. There's so many ways. Take them for the doctor's office. I think that everyone can really find a couple of hours to help a stranger. So.
Almost ready for some closing comments, but this viewer has asked, what are the most common refugee struggles that a normal citizen can assist with? This goes back to how can we help, but yet what is a particular refugee struggle that I can help with? Who wants to jump in on that?
I can answer them. Other than English, it is transportation. In Michigan, public transportation is not really sold, and it's rarely an option for somebody to function on a daily basis, to go to work or, go to school or do function normally. So definitely, if people have time and they're willing to provide transportation occasionally for refugees to go to grocery shopping or to help them in learning how to drive or go to the medical appointment, that would be a huge help.
Anyone else want to respond on that? And again, how can we be helping here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vezna, hit on, some of the very practical and realistic challenges, but I just want to echo what Elvira said too in regards to creating a sense of belonging. I've heard from so many refugees that, just having someone sit down to have a cup of tea with them, to, make them, with the experience that was shared today, that, the feeling of emptiness and just wanting to be reconnected with your family, like nothing can take that away, I'm sure. But just creating a sense of connection and belonging instead of, moving beyond just, simple statements of welcoming, but, actually, bringing them into the community and, giving them an opportunity to, talk to us and treat them, as our fellow neighbors and members of our community, I think goes a really long way from, so many stories and that have been shared with me.
Very nice. I have just one more question before final. This is pretty specific. How does Samaritas support with refugees accessing opportunities online? How does this happen?
I guess it's me.
Yeah.
Just one of the steps was provide as many computers, laptops, iPads for refugees via donations, and then virtually teaching them over the phone or Zoom how to use computer or laptop, or how to access available resources online. So remotely at this moment, because of the pandemic issue, but we are continuing to plan for future in-person trainings, and also relying on volunteers to work, as Elvira mentioned, almost adopt a family and assist them with their needs.
Thank you for that. Several more questions. We guarantee you your questions will be answered from the experts at Samaritas. Samaritas the information how to continue the conversation. But I want a quick round of take us home thoughts, if you would. Now we'll begin with you, Father Bill.
Yeah, I want to add just a last surprise that I discovered. I was thinking about what you asked earlier, and one of the things that we discovered was that when we asked people for people who had language facility, we were stunned how many people were able to actually speak the language of the people we were trying to help. It turns out we had multiple speakers of Arabic and some people who could speak Chaldean. And it was one of those surprising revelations that these people stepped forward and became kind of the heroes of our time with this family that was from Iraq. And what I would want to encourage everybody who works from a congregational perspective is never underestimate your congregation members. Never underestimate their skills, never underestimate their commitment, never underestimate their faith, and never underestimate their ability to make this project work, because I believe it is transformative.
Thank you. Elvira?
Frankly, vote. People need to vote for those who are upholding of international human rights in the United States and around the world. Currently, we don't totally have that. So I want to reiterate that question of, there are many refugees here. So what can you do to foster a sense of belonging until you can vote for someone who will do that?
Ben? Ooh, we can't hear Ben.
Sorry about that. World Refugee Day is, just such an important opportunity to recognize, the challenges, but also refugees in our communities give so much more back in their cultural, social, and economic returns than what, some may say or call take from, the services and, opportunities that are given them. And I just would ask people that haven't recognized that, or, still have more to learn about, their experience, to recognize that and just value the humanity and the, contribution of, who they are as people in our communities.
Vezna?
I would just say from my own experience, educate yourself and show classic American welcoming. So
Thank you. Yes.
look at the neighbor and help them.
All right, Basil?
I'll echo everyone else, and I have just 2 words. Refugees are us, are our community, are our society, are part of us, and just keep that in mind whenever you encounter.
Thank you. Rolly, are you still with us? I think Rolly went back to work. He has 2 jobs. So there he is. Rolly, say goodbye to us. What do you leave us with?
C'est quoi la question?
Il conclut la session. Qu'est-ce que vous voulez dire? Enfin, est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose spécifique que vous voulez partager?
Yeah.
Vous pouvez parler en français.
No. English, English, you translate also for me. First, I want to say thank you to Samaritas, because I remember 2018, 2 months after come to USA, I received a laptop. Also, I have to connect to online. I take my English course online, okay, from Samaritas. So it's very good. It's also important for me. Yeah.
Nice.
This is the first gift from Samaritas, my laptop. I like it too much. Yeah.
Well, we're glad that.
Thank you. So because my English is not better, so now I want to speak in French. Maggie, manager case to Samaritas, she's translate for me. Okay?
Yes, I am happy to translate for you. You can go ahead.
Ok, so, j'allais dire, moi je suis d'abord très content. C'est pour ça que je n'aime pas quitter Michigan parce que Samaritas c'est avec moi. Ok, first. J'ai compris ce qu'ils m'ont dit par rapport à ma famille, parce que c'est la plus grande demande que j'ai, être à côté de ma famille, que ma famille soit à côté de moi. Et j'ai compris ce qu'on a donné comme réponse. So, s'il y a autre aide que je peux demander ici au USA, c'est juste, je vais être en ordre, en règle avec tous mes papiers. Parce que j'ai déjà un travail et je crois à un avenir meilleur.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's saying that he loves being here in Michigan, and the reason he wants to stay here is because he's receiving a lot of help from Samaritas, and he understands that the current situation with bringing his family from Malawi is related to Corona and to the current situation. He understands that. Thank you for explaining this. But like the only thing he's hoping is to always follow up on his paperwork. And that's it. He's very grateful.
Great. Rolly, thank you for being here. Thank you to all our panelists. Round of applause. I hear the audience applauding. It is 3 o'clock. We want to be timely. So thank you all. Of course,
Thank you.
head to samaritas.org to continue this conversation. We are just a liftoff of how these conversations must continue. Talk to your community leaders, be a community leader, and so thank you all again. Get out and enjoy the beautiful day. And again, thanks to Samaritas for this opportunity. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.